before I step off this plane, I want to know the exact reason we had to make an emergency landing in Denver." Marcus's voice was calm, clear, and carried more weight than the captain's overhead announcement. Captain Hoffman tightened the strap on his cap, glancing around the cabin filled with passengers holding their breath. "We detected a technical issue," he replied. "For safety reasons, I had to make the call." Marcus didn't blink. "And did that issue appear before or after I asked why I was served moldy bread?" The cabin froze. No one touched their food. No one blinked. A white woman seated nearby slowly raised her phone. "I recorded it." You can hear the flight attendant say, "He doesn't belong in first class." And just then, the cabin door opened. Not airport security, but the airline's senior vice president of human resources, and, behind her, 2 executive officers carrying the authority to terminate on the spot. Have you ever been treated differently, just because of your skin color? Ever received less even though you paid the same? Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit subscribe, because on this channel, we don't tell stories to complain. We tell them to expose, to bring light into darkness, to say out loud what others are too afraid to admit. Rewind, 3 hours earlier, Gate 7B. Marcus Reynolds, a 50-year-old black CEO in a charcoal gray suit, carrying a worn leather briefcase, boarded the first-class cabin of the airline he himself holds shares in. But the look in the flight attendant's eyes didn't greet him. It asked, "Are you sure you belong here?" And that's how it all began, the way most racism begins. With a smile that never arrived. The boarding gate 7B opened with a dry beep. Marcus Reynolds stepped through as he had on countless flights before, quietly, neatly, intentionally. Armani gray suit, crisp white shirt, slim navy tie, dark leather briefcase in his left hand, iPhone 15 Pro unlocked with his fingerprint. He didn't draw attention, but if you looked closely, you'd see everything he wore was chosen to avoid the question, "What do you do for a living?" "Good morning," he said as he entered the first-class cabin. Claire, the flight attendant near the galley, heard him clearly. But she didn't respond. Just a glance. The kind of glance that scans for quick details: collar straight, shoes flawless, but skin a little too dark for seat 2A. Claire had seen well-dressed black passengers before. What unsettled her wasn't how Marcus looked. It was how effortlessly he looked like he belonged. No forced smile, no charm offense, no seeking permission. He walked in like this cabin was his because it was. Claire turned away. No greeting, no smile, no question about water or wine. To her, he wasn't a guest. Just that man who boarded the plane. Marcus didn't react. He'd seen that look 100 times before. At finance summits, in 5-star hotel lobbies, in high-rise elevators. The look that said, "You must have taken the wrong door." Boarding continued. 3 more passengers followed. Then came a white man in his 60s, silver hair combed neatly, beige suit jacket, a stooped back. He hadn't even adjusted his bag when Claire approached with a voice dipped in honey. "Welcome aboard, Mr. Whitman. May I offer you a glass of champagne or our 18-year Macallan?" Marcus caught it from the corner of his eye. He didn't even lift his gaze from his tablet. He was reviewing an internal performance report from Elite Airways, where he happened to be a silent shareholder. The very report he helped shape, showing 15% growth in the first-class segment. And yet, his personal service down 100%. Claire handed Mr. Whitman a hot towel folded like fine sushi and gave a gentle bow. To Marcus, just minutes earlier, no words, no towel, no drink, no eye contact. He smiled, not with humor, with clarity. "Ah, So we're playing that game again today." The smile wasn't for Claire. It was for the surveillance system he'd had installed across the airline's first-class crew. Seat 2A, the seat he'd booked 47 times in the past 3 years, always 2A, not out of superstition but because it was close to the door, near the exit, and easy for observation. He sank into the caramel leather. The seat hugged his spine like always, but this time it didn't greet him with champagne, no towel, no smile, no acknowledgement. Just Claire, walking by, dropping a small folded leaflet on his tray table. No words, no glance. As if placing the bill before the meal was finished. Just a hint to leave soon. Marcus picked up the paper. It was an ad for new member upgrade offers. He wasn't new. He was Platinum Elite. But apparently, still new in their eyes? New like a black man who in their minds had never really belonged in Seat 2A. He said nothing. He pressed the flight attendant call button. Not because he was thirsty, but to see how long it would take to serve a man they were trying so hard not to see. Claire returned nearly 15 minutes later. No apology, no greeting, no direct eye contact. She stood slightly angled, chin tilted as if addressing a stranger on a crowded bus. "You need anything?" Marcus looked up from his tablet and nodded calmly. "Yes, I pre-ordered the Macallan 18. Claire paused for a split second, then replied in a flat tone. "We're running low on premium stock today. I can offer orange juice or water." She placed a wrinkled bag of pretzels on the fold-out tray, the kind typically handed out in economy class on low-budget domestic flights. No explanation. No emotion. She turned and walked away, as if Marcus were part of the background, a pillar, a suitcase, or an emergency exit sign. Marcus glanced around. The silver-haired man was chatting warmly with Claire, swirling a glass of pale golden wine. A young couple was being offered toasted bread and truffle salad, smiles on their faces like something out of an ad. Only him, a snack bag, and an empty glass. He didn't need a customer satisfaction survey to see what was happening. Elite Airways was operating by a system, but the system didn't recognize skin tone. It recognized bias. Marcus didn't react. He simply unlocked his phone and tapped into the internal operations app, the real-time service monitoring software designed by his own tech team. On screen, a line of text appeared. Passenger Marcus Reynolds. Status Platinum Elite. Beverage pre-order confirmed. When the food cart arrived, few noticed. Most passengers were busy opening trays, choosing meals, lifting glasses, and breathing in the aroma of in-flight dining. Claire said nothing. She placed a tray in front of Marcus as if delivering a formal rejection letter. Marcus lifted the stainless steel cover. No salmon, no pasta, no wine. Just a cold sandwich, dry edges, discoloration on the crust. Quietly, he picked up his phone, switched to the camera. No zoom, no angle adjustment. Just one shot. The image, a sandwich on a first-class tray. Beside it, a pretzel bag and a half-empty water glass. In the background, a white woman savoring the chef's special on fine porcelain, her wine glass delicately off-center. He opened the internal messaging app. To Jessica. Note, Elite Flight 347, disparity of service confirmed. Moldy food, possible escalation. Short, blunt, like a field report, no emotion but every word a nail into the false wall of assumed equality. He had no intention of eating, no intention of raising his voice. What he wanted was simple evidence. Claire reappeared as if sensing the slight ripple of quiet rebellion. She stood there, arms loosely crossed, eyes drifting toward midair. Marcus looked up, voice gentle, as though asking about the weather. "I believe there's been a mistake with the meal." She smiled, but not kindly. It was the smirk of a movie villain fully aware of the wrong, fully uninterested in fixing it. "You're welcome not to eat it." The cabin fell silent, the kind of silence that follows a sudden loss of cabin pressure. The man next to Marcus, mid-bite into his salmon, swallowed hard. His wine glass hovered awkwardly mid-air. Marcus said nothing. He only turned his head, slightly, eyes resting on the security camera tucked in the corner of the cabin, a device he'd personally approved as part of the airline's service improvement initiative. Today, it wasn't recording service quality, it was recording decay. Marcus leaned back slightly in his seat, eyes fixed on the empty space ahead, but his mind was anything but absent. He'd lived through many forms of discrimination, subtle, silent, sometimes blunt, but there was one kind he always gave a name of its own: the chill behind the curtain. It was that hidden zone where flight attendants retreated from passenger view, where the polished mask of hospitality was peeled off, revealing smirks, scoffs, and murmurs that were never meant to be heard. He picked up his tablet, opened the internal application, the monitoring software he himself had proposed and funded 3 years ago, under the banner of enhancing premium passenger experience. A line appeared across the screen. Cabin surveillance active, audio enabled. He tapped the microphone icon. A wave of audio signals formed. It was picking up sound from behind the galley curtain, the supposedly private crew service area. The space, once quiet, now echoed like a covert concert of prejudice. First, a sigh, then a muttered sentence, clinking glasses barely muffling it. These people always act like they own the place. Claire, next time, put him in coach. Michael, or better give him pilot wings as a souvenir. Claire again. Laughter. Marcus sat upright, not out of anger, but because he knew he had just captured a moment that could not be denied. The things they said behind the curtain might have been jokes, but not everyone has the privilege of joking like that, especially not in a professional setting. Especially not when the target of the joke is seated just 4 meters away, and paying the highest fare on this flight. Marcus switched screens, opened the internal report folder. The file name read, Customer Service Uplift Q1, Q3, prepared by M. Reynolds. The first page showed a graph he'd presented to the executive board, a 4.7% drop in satisfaction among black passengers in first class. Back then, they chuckled, called it a natural variance. Now, he attached the transcript of the conversation he'd just recorded. No more bar graphs, this was live evidence. This wasn't just about him. It was about 17 other passengers who had filed formal complaints over the past year and were dismissed for lack of concrete proof. Today, Claire and Michael had generously supplied that proof with their own voices. The cabin lights shifted to a soft amber, the cue for the beginning of special service. Claire and Michael rolled the cart out from the galley, their professional smiles back on. Claire made her way down the aisle, pouring drinks. Chilled champagne for the elderly woman in seat 2C, a glass of red for the young couple in 1D, fresh bread and extra ice for the silver-haired gentleman beside Marcus. When she reached Marcus, she didn't ask. She simply placed a glass of plain water in front of him. No lemon, no ice. It looked more like rinse water for cups. She smiled. A flight attendant's smile, no more, no less. Just enough to avoid a customer service report. Marcus lifted the glass. He didn't look at Claire. He didn't reprimand her. He turned to the window and gently raised his glass into the air as if to toast someone invisible. To silent investments and silent cameras. A toast no one heard, but the surveillance system was still recording. Every action, every silence, every accidental omission, from people who were trained to never forget. Marcus stared at the shriveled sandwich on the tray. the edges curled slightly, as if embarrassed to be seen. The crust had begun to discolor a faint, moldy green, like an apology that never found its voice. He didn't touch the food. He simply pushed the tray away gently, but deliberately, as if distancing himself from a truth too blatant for anyone else to deny. Then, he pressed the call button. Not to demand, but to extend an invitation for a conversation he knew wouldn't be civil. Claire appeared, walking the way people walk when they're sure they've done nothing wrong. Yes, her voice was clipped, not due to urgency, but because the fewer emotions she displayed, the harder it would be to assign blame. Marcus looked her in the eye. "I pre-ordered the chef's special. What I received does not reflect that." Claire tilted her head, pretending to consider it like the issue was a song she couldn't quite place. There may have been an inventory issue. When that happens, we prioritize based on loyalty tiers. The words fell on Marcus like a line from a film he'd seen 100 times. He didn't argue. Instead, he calmly pulled from his wallet a Platinum Elite card. He didn't need to say a word. The card gleamed under the cabin light, carrying the weight of 200,000 air miles and 20 years of restraint. Claire glanced at the card. Her eyes flicked, tongue briefly pressing into her cheek, the reflex of someone just caught but unwilling to admit it. "I'll check again." She turned quickly, with a finality that made it seem like the conversation had glitched out of existence. But she knew he wasn't sitting there as a passenger anymore. He had become a system of record through memory, camera, and a half-drafted internal email. First class remained silent, but not the curated silence of luxury. This was the silence of awareness. Something had been named. Mr. Whitman had put down his wine long ago, not because he wasn't thirsty, but because he was paying attention. He sat in seat 2B, directly across the aisle from Marcus, an older white man in a beige wool overcoat, with the sharp eyes of someone who had seen enough and still believed in fairness. He removed his headphones, folded his glasses, and spoke not loudly, not aggressively, but loud enough to leave no room for denial. "I've flown this route every other week for the past 15 years. I've never seen a Platinum member served like this. Never." His voice wasn't louder than the engine hum, but it carried a different weight. It peeled back the thin layer of pretense. Marcus turned toward him. His expression was not grateful, nor was it seeking help. "I appreciate that, but I can handle this." It wasn't said to push people away. It was to preserve something necessary, the right to defend oneself without needing to become a victim. But Whitman's intervention stirred the cabin. A young woman in seat 3A looked up, concern in her eyes. A man nearby opened his phone's video app, pretending to scroll the news. A flight attendant peered from the galley, met Marcus's gaze, and quickly looked away. Marcus understood. The atmosphere was shifting, not necessarily toward him, but toward the truth. And the truth, once unmasked, doesn't need a slogan. It speaks for itself. Michael approached with the gait of someone enforcing internal authority firm, even and faintly performative. He stopped beside Marcus's seat. Didn't bend, didn't ask, just spoke like an air marshal of tone policing. "Sir, your behavior is disturbing other passengers." Marcus turned slowly. His eyes were clear like a man preparing for a congressional hearing. "I haven't raised my voice. I haven't left my seat. I haven't used profanity. I've asked a question." Michael paused. He wasn't used to being met with structured language. He pressed on, still trying to hold posture. "We're required to maintain a peaceful environment." Marcus nodded. But instead of backing down, he leaned forward slightly, not threatening, just focused. "And I fully support that, which is why I'm calmly asking why I received moldy food while others received wine and salmon." A woman behind them covered her mouth. A man ahead sat up straighter in his seat. The tide was turning, not because someone shouted, but because someone had started listening. Claire stood at the front of the cabin. She didn't move. She saw everything, but like every seasoned attendant, she knew. Gaslighting no longer works when everyone's eyes are open. Marcus leaned back into his seat. He didn't say another word, just glanced up toward the security camera embedded in the ceiling, the very model he'd approved for installation in all first-class cabins 3 months ago. Back then, he'd thought to improve service quality. Today, the camera wasn't just recording service. It was capturing a quiet uprising in full, a black man asking to be served exactly what he paid for. Marcus opened his tablet. The facial recognition unlocked the screen in an instant. No one around him noticed they were busy slicing salmon, sipping wine, soaking in the air of first-class luxury. Only he was dining on a moldy sandwich and murky apple juice, the kind of drink typically handed out for free in economy class to unaccompanied minors. He wasn't eating, he was working. His finger glided over the icon for the internal monitoring system, Surveilair V2.1. The cabin audio recording indicator was green. The system had been live since takeoff, capturing sound, image, coordinates. He selected Cabin Galley, Zone A, where Claire and Michael had retreated after the tense exchange. From the small speaker came ambient noise clinks of cutlery against glass. Then, as clearly as if whispered beside his ear, Claire. He probably got in here with some diversity code. Michael. Or he's someone's cousin on the board. Claire. Look at his attitude. Sitting there like he owns the place. Marcus's face didn't change. He simply tapped record clip, a small file, but enough to light a fire under the very diversity and inclusion program the airline had proudly advertised. He glanced at the sandwich in front of him. On the surface, a downgraded meal, but within the story of hundreds who had been treated just like him, but without a camera to capture it. Today, the camera was running, and it didn't blink. Marcus didn't speak, didn't complain, didn't reach for a phone to call anyone. He quietly reopened the tablet, opened the email app, typed a subject line incident report, Flight 347. To Jessica, CC Diane Chen, HR attachments, 1 audio recording, 1 photo of the moldy sandwich, 1 transcript of the galley conversation. No need for lengthy prose, he typed plainly, each line clear like entries in a report. Flight 347. First-class passenger received discriminatory service. Audio and photographic evidence attached. Requesting review of all customer feedback from black passengers over the past 6 months. I am currently on this flight. He signed Marcus Reynolds, board member. Then he hit send. No sound effect, no drum roll, just the soft glow of the screen lighting his cheek. To most passengers, this was just another email. To those who understood the system, this was a distress signal. To the system itself, this was a first warning shot. Marcus placed the tablet down, leaned back into his seat, not angry, not anxious, still silent, but silent by choice. In the distance, the clink of wine glasses continued. Claire was still pouring. Passengers were still laughing. Only Marcus hadn't taken a single sip, not out of thirst, but because he was waiting. His silence wasn't weakness, it was preparation, like someone holding a drawn bow, not firing yet, but already aimed. A young woman in seat 3D whispered, just loud enough for the person next to her to hear, "He's so calm, almost scary." She said it like she was watching an action movie, but instead of explosions, it was a black man in a suit, not yelling, not accusing, just sitting there, quietly building a case. Mr. Whitman turned his head, wine glass still in hand. He smiled slightly, not amused, but as if explaining something. That's not calm. That's control. You should worry when a black man's that silent. His eyes never left Marcus, because silence, in the right hands, is a weapon. A young flight attendant coming up from the rear cabin looked at Marcus, opened her mouth to speak, then changed her mind. Something in his posture, straight spine, relaxed shoulders, hand resting gently on the tablet made her pause. Not out of fear, but recognition. This man wasn't alone. He had evidence. He had clarity. He had power. Silent but not weak, restrained but not resigned. Marcus wasn't behaving like a victim. He was operating like a moral auditor, and he had just opened the ledger. The intercom crackled to life, slicing through the silence like a velvet curtain being yanked open. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. Due to a technical issue, we'll be landing at Denver International for safety reasons. The entire cabin paused. A few passengers looked up from their wine glasses. Some exchanged glances. No one panicked. Because the plane was still flying straight. No turbulence, no tilt, no deceleration. The engine hummed as steadily as soft jazz after office hours. Only now the music had changed key. Marcus showed no reaction except a small, almost courteous tilt of the head. "Interesting," he said, just loud enough for Mr. Whitman beside him to hear. "Safety only became an issue after I requested equal service." Whitman gave a slow nod. No smile. He understood. This wasn't a technical failure. It was a political one. Above the seats, the seatbelt sign pinged on again. But Marcus knew. When people lose control of the narrative, they redirect the entire plane. The Boeing 787 touched down on Denver's runway with a smoothness that betrayed the emergency. No screeching brakes, no police at the gate, just an unscheduled landing for an unspeakable reason. Marcus unlocked his phone and typed quickly. "Diane, Gate B-17, full HR team. This is no longer a service issue. It's structural." He hit send. The message was short, but it carried the weight of a boardroom memorandum. Inside the cabin, Claire was still moving about, adjusting her skirt, checking the tea tray, smiling like nothing had happened, but her lips had begun to crack. Flecks of lipstick peeled away like someone was stripping off layers of disguise. There's something people don't say enough about fear. It doesn't always make you sweat. Sometimes, it just dries your mouth. Marcus didn't look at her, because he knew. The cameras had seen enough. A soft ding echoed. The cabin door opened, but it wasn't security. It wasn't maintenance. It was Diane Chen. Navy dress, low ponytail, no name badge, just a tablet in hand. Behind her, two executives in black suits from corporate headquarters. The cabin seemed to hold its breath. Claire took a tiny step back, as if not wanting to be seen. Diane didn't need to ask who Marcus was. She walked straight to the front of the cabin, her eyes scanning once. Then she stopped in front of the captain. "Captain Hoffman, Mr. Reynolds will not be removed, but you might." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't issue a command. She didn't threaten. She simply delivered a decision signed 10 minutes ago. No one spoke, but Claire's sharp inhale was loud like the ring of a school bell before a surprise test. She stammered. "Wait, there were cameras." Marcus turned to her with the calm gaze of a man who had nothing left to prove. He answered slowly, as if striking each syllable against the tight chords of her spine. "Yes, you looked straight at them." The engine's hum remained steady, but the air in first class had shifted. No more soft laughter, no rolling suitcases, no clinking of silver against glass. Only A silence waiting to be broken. Marcus rose from seat 2A. He adjusted his jacket button, not a strand of hair out of place. He walked to the front of the cabin where the crew microphone waited. No permission asked. No nod needed. He picked up the mic, pressed it lightly. The soft click echoed like the opening gavel of a courtroom. His voice came through the cabin speakers low, clear, steady, not a protest, a declaration. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Marcus Reynolds. I'm not just your fellow passenger, I'm part owner of this airline. Silence surged like a dam cracking. A man in the back nearly spilled his coffee. A little girl turned to her mother. Is he the boss of the plane? Marcus continued. Today, I was served moldy food, but that's not the problem. The problem is I was told directly and indirectly that I didn't belong here. No interruptions, no coughs, just a spreading awareness with every word. He didn't raise his voice. He wasn't angry. But each line pierced like a needle into numb flesh into places first-class passengers preferred to forget ever felt pain. Marcus paused. A quiet inhale. Not out of emotion, but to let everyone feel the weight of what was coming. To thank you all for enduring this disruption, every passenger will receive. He looked up, eyes scanning the entire cabin as if addressing each person individually. A full refund for this flight, $10,000 in compensation, and 5 years of complimentary elite upgrades. A beat of silence. Then clap. A white woman in seat 3C started applauding, then a breath of relief, then hands came together, scattered at first, then rising like the first rain on a tin roof fast, unexpected, unstoppable. The cabin erupted. No one complained about the diverted flight. No one asked, isn't that too much money, because everyone knew the cost of silence had been too high, for too long. Whitman glanced over, smiling faintly. That's one way to apologize. A young man behind muttered, I've never seen justice with a dollar sign this clear. Marcus didn't smile. He didn't do this for applause. He was rewriting the way an airline confronts the truth. He bowed his head not deeply, but enough to honor the moment. No one required it of him, but he knew. A real apology starts with listening and ends with action. He looked up again, continued. Let this be remembered when injustice happens in public. Resolution must happen in public too. Not the kind of words meant for headlines, but the kind you carve into an HR manual. A junior flight attendant, not Claire, stood near the galley. Her eyes were red, not from fear, but because, for the first time in her career, she had witnessed justice, not at the gate, but in the sky. A young man whispered to his wife, That was better than any TED Talk I've ever heard. His wife nodded, eyes fixed on Marcus, not out of awe, but because she knew. They had just witnessed a rare moment where a black man didn't just reclaim his dignity, he made the entire cabin recognize it. 6 months later, Elite Airways nonstop flight from New York to San Francisco. Seat 2A is occupied again. It's still Marcus Reynolds. The same familiar gray suit, the brown leather briefcase, worn smooth with time, and his eyes no longer cautious, but calm, like someone who's been through the storm without letting it reshape him. Claire is no longer here. Her disciplinary file runs 18 pages long. Captain Hoffman. On unpaid leave, pending an FAA investigation. No public apology was ever issued, but the list of people reassigned internally grew longer every month. A new flight attendant approaches a young brown-skinned woman, hair tied back in a soft curl, name tag reading Sarah. Her smile is genuine, unpolished, and real. Good evening, Mr. Reynolds. Your Macallan 18 and Chef's Special are ready." Marcus nods, not surprised. Sarah places the tray on his table, along with a small folded letter. No logo, no embellishment, just a plain sheet of paper, trembling softly under the cabin light. He opens it. The handwriting leans unevenly, likely hers. "Thank you for speaking when others had to stay quiet. You made this job feel safe again." Marcus doesn't write a reply, but inside, he knows. This is why he didn't stay silent. Big change rarely begins with applause. It begins when silence is broken. And then comes the system. Elite Airways now has a new reporting system, simpler, anonymous, with mandatory response within 72 hours. Cabin cameras aren't limited to first class anymore. They've been installed throughout the aircraft, even in economy, where the unheard used to vanish. 3 other airlines have adopted similar models, not because they learned, but because passengers demanded it. Marcus opens his tablet, Q2 performance chart. First class bookings plus 118%. More returning customers. For the first time, satisfaction among black passengers equals the fleet-wide average. He types a small note on the screen. Truth doesn't harm a brand. It rebuilds it from the root. This change wasn't pretty. It came with thick internal reports, with debates, with resistance, with emails tight as piano wire. But it was necessary. And to Marcus, that mattered more than any apology. The airplane's intercom crackled to life this time, causing no tension. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're now beginning our final descent into San Francisco." Marcus looked out the window. The lights below flickered softly, a city waiting. He closed his eyes, breathed deeply. Not to suppress anything, but because for the first time in a long time, he felt he was flying like a regular person. No bracing for suspicious stares, no recording, fearing someone's voice would change behind the curtain. No need to prove he deserved to be here. He was simply in the sky, and being served like anyone else holding a first-class ticket. Not as a black CEO, not as a surveillance program in human form, not as a living example of racial inequality. Just a passenger. If this story touched your heart, make sure to like, share, and subscribe. Every click helps us bring more powerful stories of empathy, justice, and silent strength to life. Your support is what fuels this journey. Let's keep standing together and rising higher, one story at a time. Stay safe and inspired.